Thank you, Cindy. And we're going to take us, we'll hold our questions for after our first three speakers, our introductory speakers this morning. Our next speaker is Dr. Richard Pouyat. He's a retired and emeritus U.S. Forest Service research scientist. And he is also a current ACES employee for USDA and my mentor in soil moisture monitoring. He's a former advisor to the White House, and his training in ecology, soil science, and biochemistry has helped him investigate urban ecosystems, and the effect of urban sprawl on natural systems is extensive. Rich.
Thank you. I know most of us are scientists out here, and we put our head down and charge forward to get the work done. But I wanted to take a little bit of time to say some thank yous before I do my talk, rather than at the end when I'm rushing it, things like that, because there's a lot of people here who have really put a lot into this to get us to where we are now. And we really are having, I feel, the gaining momentum post-COVID kind of thing. And so I'm going to do the thank yous now. And I'm having the same trouble everybody else did. Obviously, here's two people that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their, their support and also talent. And it's been a pleasure for me to work with Stephanie Conley, because she has got the organizational skills and the energy to really push this stuff forward. And so, when everything that we're talking about today would not occur without Stephanie's work. And of course, having Cindy West, who is a leader in the Forest Service, her support. Anybody here who works in the federal government knows that if you don't get support from leadership, you're not going to have big things happen. And so Cindy has been incredible for that. And of course, Mike and Marena, and I'm going to go through, I've been asked to go a little bit through the history here, but they have really welcomed this whole forest movement with open arms, and we really appreciate that. And putting these meetings on is not an easy thing. Adding an extra day and all the complications that go with that, that's a lot of work. So we very much appreciate that. And of course, we have two other members of our planning team, Russ Briggs and Carlos Montero, and you're going to hear from Stephanie, Russ, and Carlos later on today. But without their help, none of this happens. Okay, now I'm going to, and of course, we have lots of collaborators, NRCS in particular, on this project, very much helping us. So I've been charged with kind of giving us a little bit of history. Mark gave the long history on Tuesday. I'm going to give the short history today based on, where we've been in the Forest Service and how we got to where we are today. And I'm going to set the stage for the rest of the meeting today. So I'll be referring to a lot of people giving talks, what they're going to kind of be talking about. So it all started for me in 2016, and I was working with OSTP at the time, and the Obama administration was very much dealing with drought situation in various parts of the country. Also, they were pushing very much so citizen science. So Peter's here. He's going to talk to you later about that. And I had the privilege of attending the first, the first meeting of that, on soil moisture monitoring. And I think was that in Boulder? Was anybody else there at that meeting? I think it was Boulder, yeah. And so, and it was a great meeting. I was really impressed with how everybody got along. There was this really strong commitment to doing this. But, from working in the Forest Service, I was like, where are the trees? And like Cindy mentioned before, it had to really start with an agricultural emphasis, obviously. The farmers of this country, they're feeding the world, not only feeding the country. But when you look at the photos in a lot of these reports, it's all, plains and crops and things like that. And so the story continues, after my OSTP work, I had another year I spent in the Washington office in the Forest Service, and was asked to help coordinate a science synthesis of what we know about forest soils, mostly with Forest Service scientists. And we held a workshop, and one of the chapters in the book was on soil and water. And many of you will know Mary Beth Adams, and so from the Furneaux. And at that meeting was Cindy West, and I'm glad she was there. And so a couple things that came out of that meeting, and this is, basically, soil moisture is largely unexplored, more tools are needed, and so on and so forth. And what I really was impressed with the chapter was they realized that soil moisture isn't the only thing that we have to look at, that these forests are very complex compared to a monoculture that you have an agricultural situation with fairly uniform soils. I know they're not totally uniform. You get into a forest ecosystem, there's way more complexity, heterogeneity and things like that. And so they were really saying we have to, there's other parts because we have perennial vegetation, we have deep rooted plants, yada, yada, yada. I'm from New York, so I use that term. And so there's other things we have to look at. And basically, I don't have to go, you guys know all this stuff, but it, kind of suggests that we need a modeling approach to fill in the gaps. Can't take all these measurements all around the landscape. We can take some of these measurements in a lot of the landscape, but we're going to have to be able to do that using various modeling approaches. And we have a session today where we're going to talk a lot about that. So that's that connection. So moving onward, and Cindy was at that meeting, and I think she was impressed in how much we got done and were able to accomplish. And so she was very much interested, as she said before, in these drought impacts on forests, and so asked me to help coordinate a workshop with Michigan Tech University back in 2018, I think it was, with the following objectives: basically assess research and data available, look at remotely sensed data as well as in situ, so looking at both platforms, explore opportunities to expand and integrate existing networks and filling in gaps. Does this all sound familiar? We've been talking about this the last couple of days. And the research needed, but from a very specifically from a forest cover perspective. And we came up with lots of recommendations and suggestions. I don't have time to go through all these. I kind of highlighted some of these things, but again, we've all heard this before, but we did talk a lot about integration of soil moisture and fuels data because of the wildfire issues and things like that. And obviously integrate, for a centralized database and so on and so forth. And we did also talk a little bit about citizen science again. Okay, so this takes us then to a strategy for a national coordinated soil moisture monitoring network, which a lot of folks in this room participated in. And I think it was like, where's my 2018, 2019? I can't remember. Around there. And so we caught wind of this a little bit late. They had already done a very fine job of pulling a lot of information together. And they were very graciously, the authors, the co-authors allowed the Forest Service to do a quick review to see where we can get our, get forests into the discussion. But again, here's the cover of that report. And I would ask, anyway, this is the executive, this is the chapters, but we're still looking for the trees. And so, but they very graciously allowed us to review, and we kind of, in a couple places inserted we're able to insert stuff on forests. And this is some text from that. But for me, the most important line was, in concert with the U.S. Forest Service, as well as state forest managers, I never liked that acronym, Mike, should develop plans for implementing soil moisture monitoring stations for beneath forest canopies. And this was really important. And we really thank the authors for allowing us to get that in there, because that really started us going within the Forest Service. And I just want to point out there's lots of potential. We're going to hear about the RAWs, the remote automated weather stations. Stephanie's going to talk way more about that, but there's a lot of potential there. I like to think of the glass half full instead of half empty. We have even more potential with our experimental forests, many of which have gauged watersheds and some going back 70 years. So this is really valuable stuff. And this is where we can bring in the water balance, model calibration, and things like that are needed for these pieces of the landscape. And so we're working with NRCS, incorporating the DSP is dynamic soil properties, and using a modeling approach to do that. And we're doing it right now currently at Pouyat and Hubbard Brook. And again, you'll hear more about that. Carlos will talk about that in particular. And we have more to get started, and Stephanie will bring up a couple of those, I think. And I'm not going to go through all these. I just want to show you that there's a lot going on. And again, thanks to the efforts of Stephanie and the team, there's a lot going on now with forests. We got momentum, and we really want to keep it going. So some topics and questions to think about during today's workshop. And basically, we want to think about scaling up. Again, we have this complex topography, and it's not only horizontal, it's vertical as well. So it's three-dimensional kind of scales that we have to worry about. And again, we have perennial vegetation. Some of it, the transpiration differences are really very different, like conifers and deciduous trees. And we have interception and things like that. And of course, there's the O layer. The O layer really adds a complexity to soil moisture monitoring. And we're going to talk about challenges and the diversity of needs. And I call it diversity of needs. Cindy talked about a lot of it. We can use soil moisture data in our forest management practices in a lot of different ways. It's not about forest health. It's about slope stabilization. It's fire hazard. It's water quantity. It's recreational use. It's when to harvest, when not to harvest, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot there. And so we have lots of challenges with remote sensing. And we'll hear more about that today too. And then also think about forest versus agriculture and this whole thing that we're doing. And I have to put one shout out for urban forest soils. Kathy did a wonderful job on Tuesday talking about this, so I don't need to talk about it, but I just want to say that, as she pointed out, 80% of the population lives in urban and suburban areas. And guess what? That's where the voters are. And so if you want support for a program, you might want to think about, going where the people are. And these are discussion questions I can cover we'll cover when we get to the discussion at the end of the session today. So that's it.